Hello, and welcome to the Wine Enthusiast podcast, your serving of wine trends and passionate people beyond the bottle. I'm Lauren Buzzio, the managing editor here at Wine Enthusiast, and in this episode, we're taking a virtual trip to the Greek islands. Did you know that some of the most ancient and unique wines in the world are grown on Greece's Ionian and Aegean islands, like Santorini, Crete, and Kefalonia? Editor-in-Chief Susan Kostrzewa tapped Master of Wine Yiannis Karakasis for a virtual Venice tour through these magnificent locales to talk through top varieties and producers, as well as discuss the often incredible history of the vineyards and the grapes, and what makes these wines so special. But first, a story from our sponsor Wente Vineyards about their Make Time initiative. If the past few months have taught us anything, it's the importance of making time to do what matters. Whether that's taking a few minutes to connect with loved ones, a few hours testing a challenging recipe for a wonderful family meal, or a few days to create your new home garden because you've always wanted one. Whatever you do, for yourself or for others, remember that time can rush by in the blink of an eye. And when we take those hours, minutes, or days to do something truly meaningful, what was once a smudge on the calendar becomes a moment of timelessness. For 5 generations, the Wente family has believed in the importance of making time and have seen and felt the joy that ensues from these moments. The Wente team is truly inspired by the happiness and connection created when people make time to enjoy a glass of wine on the tasting lounge patio with friends, or at home sharing stories of the day over a glass of wine. To that end, Wente made its company vision to inspire people to make time for what matters. Because at the end of the day, wine is really about people, and the moments you make time to share together, and the memories you hold on to. If there is one thing the team at Wente wants you to walk away with today, it's to encourage you to be intentional and take time to create meaningful memories. So take a moment and commit to making time for whatever matters to you. Visit wentevineyards.com for daily inspiration and tips on how you can shift daily routine into meaningful moments. Whatever you choose to make time for, Wente will be here to help make it memorable.
So Yiannis, thank you so much for joining us. I was just thinking, we've been in lockdown here. I'm in Connecticut, just outside of New York City. And we've been, of course, like everyone in the world, going through these sort of new normal of being home and quarantined, and thinking about the Greek islands right now sounds pretty amazing to me. So I think our timing on our segment is perfect.
I think so as well.
Yeah. Where are you located, Yiannis?
I'm located in Athens, so central Greece, but pretty much close and with a good proximity to most Greek islands, especially Kyklades.
Right. So let's talk about those islands. I've learned a lot about Greek wine over the years as the Greek wine critic for Wine Enthusiast. I've learned a lot about just the variety of topography in Greece, because I think most people do associate Greece with the islands. Obviously, we know that the mainland of Greece, extremely mountainous, lots of incredible wine regions there as well. But today we're going to talk about the islands and the wines they produce. So I think that most people in the US, or at least in the wine community, the variety they associate most with Greece right now would be Assyrtiko. And Assyrtiko is a white wine variety. The origin of that wine is Santorini, the island of Santorini, which, again, from a tourism standpoint, anyone who's been there knows how beautiful and unique it is. Also, just how unique the land and the volcanic soil is. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about Santorini and why you think it's such a unique place for wines. And really, let's start with the Assyrtiko. What do you think that the soil and terroir of Santorini lends to Assyrtiko?
Yeah, I would love to talk about Santorini and Assyrtiko and explain all this story. You know, I think every region in the world talks about uniqueness, talks about possessing something unique. You go to Bordeaux, they talk about the first growths, of course. You go to Burgundy, they talk about possessing the holy grail of Pinot Noir and the right. You go to the Rhone, you can see the staked vines, fantastic soils. But let's describe a little bit the story of Santorini. And for me, this is something really amazing because, first of all, you have centuries of viticulture. You have more than 34 continuous centuries of viticulture. You have old vines that, Susan, you don't really know how old they are. They can be 200 years old, they can be 300 years old, they can be 400 years old. You have volcanic soils with no phylloxera. So you don't have phylloxera and you're safe from phylloxera because you have so little clay that the louse cannot survive. And then you have dangerously low yields. So yields can be, last year in 2019, a very challenging vintage for the island. We had 5 hectoliters per hectare. So we need to be technical because this is how yields are measured, or you go with weight per vine. So 5 hectoliters per hectare is really nothing. Then you have this amazing variety that I'm going to talk separately, Assyrtiko, which covers around 90% of the vineyard. Of the 1,225 hectares, 1,000 hectares is Assyrtiko. These are the latest numbers I have gathered. And
Mhm.
now is the best part. All these are planted on the slopes of one of the most aggressive volcanoes in the history of the world, still active. So this is the
Right, I think
story.
that's the thing that people don't realize, yeah, that it's a still an active volcano.
Yes, last eruption was in 1950, and besides the major eruption in 1645 before Christ that shaped the caldera and created all this topography, we had many more. We had in 1312 before Christ. We have in 197, and we had in 1707 when we had the appearance of Nea Kamenni, the small islands at the center of the sea. So this is, for me, I feel that this is really something. So you have this unique combination of breathtaking place and these amazing wines. And Susan, since you said to talk a little bit about Assyrtiko, and I don't want to take a lot of time because I know you have many questions. But what is Assyrtiko? It is a white variety, but how it behaves is like a red variety. It needs time in the glass to open up. It needs cellaring. It is the variety, I think, the one exceptional variety that you have an alcohol. Again, I need to be technical. You have alcohol of 14.8, real number of a Santorini Assyrtiko. You have a pH of, I think, 278 or 285, whatever. And you have total acidity of 7 to 7.2 grams of tartaric acid. So it's really unbelievable how this variety can preserve the acid despite reaching high levels of maturity. And this is the reason, to conclude my argument, this is the reason that this variety is favored in many warm climate areas. You can see it in Australia, you can see it in South Africa, I've seen it in Lebanon,
Oh,
and
wow, I
yeah,
didn't know it was being grown in so many places, how interesting.
yeah, it was a surprise for me as well when I was in the Lebanon last year with the Institute of Masters of Wine, and he said, Yanis, you know what this variety is? I said, Assyrtiko. Come on.
Well,
In-
excuse me.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think too what you've been talking about is, it's such a unique kind of collection of a situation that creates this wine,
Hmm.
and I think from an ageability standpoint too, I learned a lot the last time I was on Santorini just about the ageability of the wine and how you can be really. I mean, I've tasted Sirticos that are 10 plus years old, and they're really just starting to show character that that I wouldn't have expected. I mean, there's obviously, and we can talk a little bit about what Assyrtiko, kind of what the character is. And it obviously changes as it grows in different regions. But Santorini, to me, there's a smokiness to it. There's that salinity to it, the acid, but it still has all that sort of generous fruit. It's to me, it is a truly unique wine. I don't think I've tasted anything like it before. And it to me, often when I'm trying to introduce people to Greek wine, Assyrtiko is one of the first, even though it is for some it can be quite surprising, and not everybody loves it immediately. But I think it's one of the best wines to introduce to people if you really want to show them what Greek wine can do.
Yeah, and you have so many styles. So the styles of Assyrtiko can range from the mineral-driven, unoaked and creamy due to less aging, or full-bodied enoki, often with some oxidative nuances that in Santorini we call it nicteri. And the taste of Assyrtiko, I completely agree with what you said, is lemons, and salt. So
That's a
simple.
good description.
Lemons and
Yeah.
salt. The fruit profile depends on the level of ripeness and the harvest day. So if you have for example, an Assyrtiko at approximately 13 or 13.5% of alcohol, you expect a little bit of citrus and stone fruit. If you exceed 14.5%, you expect even some tropical fruit.
Right. So, what other, if we can talk about some other varieties that are grown on Santorini, because obviously Assyrtiko is sort of the famous variety, but there are other wines grown on the island. Can you talk a little bit about ones that you think are interesting?
Yeah, just to have a context, there is a lovely book about traditional winemaking in Santorini by George Venetsanos that unfortunately only in Greek so far, and there he describes 62 varieties. Now we talk more or less about 6 to 8 varieties. We talk about, of course, Assyrtiko. We talk about Aidani. Aidani is more or less 30 hectares, 30 hectares. We talk a little bit about Athiri, and we talk about some rare varieties like Gaiduria and Katsano, and 3 red varieties, Mandilaria, very common in the other Aegean islands. This is 85 hectares. Mavro Tragano, again, excuse me for the complexity of the words, Mavrotragano. This is 14.1 hectares, and there is a little bit of Vudomato that most of the time is used as a rosé wine, especially by Gavalas. So more or less, these are the varieties. For me, beyond Assyrtiko, single varietal wines, interesting examples from Aidani and Mavrotragano. And then we talk a little bit about Mandilaria and Vudomato.
Right. I actually just did a recent tasting of some wines, and had an Argyros Atlantis, which is a white blend of Assyrtiko, Aidani, and Aetheri. And I think not only do those wines, of course, stand on their own, but blended together, those whites are really delicious. So, I think again, you're talking about varieties that are centuries and centuries old.
Ancient varieties.
Absolute ancient, exactly. I mean, and I think we'll talk more actually, I wanna move on to Crete in a moment, but, uh, really, I mean, I think you're talking about some of the oldest vineyards in the world, and certainly some of the oldest continuously made varieties
Exactly.
in the world are in Greece. So there's been many millennia to perfect these amazing wines. Um, I want to move on to Crete because I personally was just there, I guess, about a year and a half ago.
Hmm.
Spent a week there. Really, just was absolutely blown away by
By
all the
everything.
innovation, everything. It is incredible. It is. I mean, the food, the wine, the scenery, the people. It really is so unique. But what I thought was exciting was the innovation,
Hmm.
and really meeting some of these young producers, these younger winemakers who've trained elsewhere. They've come back to Crete. They have these amazing ideas. What I would like to talk about first is the history of winemaking in Crete, because we just talked about the ancient sort of legacy of winemaking in Greece. And Crete, of course, I mean, is considered one of the oldest of the winemaking regions. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I think we have evidence of grapes in Kato Zagros in the eastern part of Crete that goes back to almost 4,000 years ago. And if we go to Vathipetro, we have possibly the most ancient press house in Europe, again almost 4,000 years old. This is, I think, 9 kilometers from Iraklio, one of the main ports of Crete. Wine was extremely important for the Minoan civilization, and you have a lot of jars, a lot of grapes remains in the palace of Knossos, and you have also a ideogram in linear B about wine. So the whole culture of wine goes back so many years in Greece and in Crete specifically.
One of my experiences when I was in Crete, and I'm forgetting now the exact vineyard that we were in, but we were walking through just looking at some vines and
Mhm.
sort of stumbled over something in the ground, and we looked at it, and it was an ancient wine press. Like we basically did an excavation on the spot.
Yeah, in the Indiana Jones in Crete.
Exactly. And I mean, the vintner and I were talking, and he said, "Well, this isn't that unusual. We this is just how it is on Crete. We just trip over, history all the time, and obviously they value and are and of course, care for these things. But I just was blown away because it's so much a part of just daily life there. Wine has been on that island and part of that culture for forever. I mean, really, it was for me as an American who, something old here is 200 years old. You're talking, 4,000 years old, very different situation or more even. So I talked a little bit about just what I've seen on Crete again from perspective of innovations and I was hoping you could talk a little bit about what you're seeing on Crete right now that you find exciting on the winemaking side.
Okay, Crete. There are many things we can talk about. First of all, this is the area in Greece that has improved its reputation so great the last 20 years. Before that, most Cretan wine was more or less like rocket fuel, oxidized, undrinkable for you and me, maybe interesting for someone else. But over the last 2 decades, we've seen so much progress, and this is partly attributed also to Wines of Crete. This is the network of Cretan winemakers, and also to the work of specific winemakers like Yiannis Economou, like Nikos Douloufakis, Lirarakis, Diamandakis. Everything is with Akis, obviously. There is so much good work. Manusakis combining international varieties, but also indigenous varieties. So these are the producers that first created a wave of Cretan wine, and then we have so many wineries now focusing mainly in Vidiano. So what I see now as exciting is the expressions of Vidiano. It's a lovely variety. Um, we have to wait to see if it can produce the level of quality that the Tope Certico can do. But I think results are very promising, and I like seeing Vidiano in so many expressions. We can see Vidiano which has like a rich apricot fruit and fresh acidity, vinified in stainless steel, in oak, as a skin contact wine, as a sparkling wine. So this helps the breakdown of the variety and understanding what it can produce. And then a variety that people didn't really appreciate maybe 10 years ago, Latico, is reintroduced now and produces some of the best wines in the country. Latico,
Yeah, I've really liked the Atticos that I've tasted. It was definitely a convert when I visited and started tasting all the different expressions of that. So
So yeah, Yatiko for me, as we've seen from the wines of Economo, also we are witnessing by the wines of Dulfakis and other producers, we can expect even more things. I was talking with Nikos 2 days ago, and for an interview, an article in Greek, and he was saying that now he's thinking about a single vineyard Yatiko. He's thinking about a Yatiko that can be more age-worthy uh, compared to his red Daphneos. So they're trying to explore this variety as well, and of course take advantage of the good name of Liatico internationally. And for me, these are the most interesting Greek varieties. But I have to say that international varieties like Syrah, like Mourvedre, like Roussanne, as pioneered by Manusakis, are fantastic wines. And I don't have an issue because they're international varieties, because they have been adapted fantastically in the island.
Right, and they have their own unique character clearly.
Yeah, and some of the best Syrahs I've tasted, they come from Crete.
And what about Kotzefali? And I actually had made a note of one of the wines I tasted, which is a Karakasis. Called the Little Prince. It's a blend of Kotzefali and Mandalari,
Yep.
and I made a note of it because I thought it was a nice indigenous sort of blended wine that American palates, again, who might not be familiar with some of these styles and wines might enjoy and find kind of accessible. And can you talk a little bit about maybe like some of the blends on Crete?
This is a traditional Cretan blend. You have the most important red varieties. Kotsifali has the aroma, doesn't have the color, doesn't have the acidity, something that Mandilari adds to the blend. So if you try to make a single varietal wine from either Kotsifali or Mandilari, it would be kind of tough. But if you blend them, you get a more complete Cretan wine, and this is the signature red blend of Crete. Rather interesting. It depends on the proportion of Mandilari and Kotsifali, because you understand if you have 80% Kotsifali or 80% Mandilari, the wine is completely different. The more Mandilari, the wine will become more age-worthy, but very tannic. Lidarakis is trying hard presenting a single vineyard Mandilari, but again, it takes so much time to get along.
Need a break from the news? We're very excited to tell you about an all new podcast from our partner site, Thirsty Nest, the first wine and spirits registry for the modern couple. This podcast is called Can I Buy You a Drink? And on it, founder Jackie Strum will interview wine and wedding industry up and comers about their very own meet cute stories and their path to finding the one. It's a dreamy break from all the scary headlines that will warm your cold, cold heart. So check out Can I Buy You a Drink from the Thirsty Nest team on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or any other podcast platform you prefer.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the smaller islands that are producing great wine. And I have to be 100% honest, I haven't made it to a lot of them yet. So some of what you're going to talk to us about, I'm hoping will be my guide as well. But again, we're talking about islands that have been making wine for millennia, and I think they're absolutely worth noting. And a lot of these wines are now becoming available in the States, where previously they may not have been. So, can you talk a little bit about some of those islands just of note for you?
Yeah, I would love to. First of all, we need to start. So after Crete, we need to start with Kefalonia. This is on the Ionian part, so it is on the western part of Greece, not in the Aegean Sea, but the Ionian Sea, which is more calm and it has a different scenery. It's like the Caribbean Sea compared to the wildness of the Aegean. And Kefalonia has, I think, 8 wineries, and more or less all of them focus on quality wine. So you have really distinctive wines, mainly from a white variety called Robola. Robola is lemon and fennel, very good acidity, usually an oaked, less alcohol than Assyrtiko, can have high level of freshness and minerality. And you have also the dry Mavrodaphne, which has been like reinvented and rediscovered now in Greece and expressed not as a sweet wine, of course, there is the sweet element to the variety, but as a dry wine, which is very perfumed with mild tannins and highlighting a lot of elegance. What I see, what I see in Kefalonia is now the breakdown of the different terroirs. So we are starting seeing single vineyard wines, and again, Kefalonia has interesting soils, has limestone soils that have very good drainage and they bring something unique to the wine. They have bush vines, a lot of pre-phylloxera. There is unfortunately phylloxera in Kefalonia since the mid 70s, if I'm not mistaken. But there are a lot of vines, on their own roots, and we see some of the most amazing Greek wines now from the island. Robola, now we see it by all these producers differently. We see it from the cooperative Aurealius Gea in this style. Then we see it from Gentilini in a more mineral style. If you go to Petrakopoulos and Sklavos, you see an expression which is more natural, more earthy, sometimes fatter but still fresh.
And what about, I had a note, Paros and some of these other smaller
Yes,
islands.
yes. Paros. So after that, I would talk a little bit again about the Kyklades. There is viticulture and winemaking in a lot of them, but obviously we need to talk about some of them. Uh, I would like to talk first about Tinos because we have more or less 6 or 7 wineries now in Tinos, another island close to Athens. You go there in 1 hour and 30 minutes, and you have some granitic terroirs, really out of this world. Um, it is another experience and another expression of Assyrtiko and Mavrotragano. Everything started there by the Tinos project, although there was winemaking in the island from Fonsu Winery in 1997, but no one, but the reputation was not great. So after Tinos, Tiniaki Abelones, people were starting to invest again, and now we have other wineries as well. So Tinos is not only a religious destination now, it is becoming quickly a food and wine destination. Then we have Paros. Paros again. Uh-huh. Not a lot of phylloxera there. Maybe there is no phylloxera. Bush vines that look a little bit like Santorini, but they're crawling vines. They have their own Monenvasia, their own variety. They have also some great Assyrticos. For example, Moraitis has a single vineyard called Sarakinico. Very mineral. I was really impressed by that wine. But then when I looked to the soil, it was poor, rocky, low yields, and sometimes the style of Santorini can be imitated in other places. And
Hmm.
we need to talk if we want to be fair with the terminology of island. We need to talk about Evia. Evia is an island. Although people don't understand, it's a big island, and in Evia we have some really great quality driven producers, both on the northern part and the main part, with Assyrticos, with Malagousia, with international varieties like Avantis and Vrignotis, and in other varieties like Patmos, Syros, and of course Samos. We have a lot of things to discuss. I think we're gonna see more things in the islands because for me this is the next big thing. When people come to the islands, they get back all the best memories. Why not take also a bottle of wine? And from our side, we need to be certain to offer them the best that we have.
How big are these vineyards on some of these islands? Because I think, you're talking probably about pretty small yields depending on the size of the island. I mean, is that a challenge? Because there's only so much that I would expect that you can expand.
Yeah, it is. It is. The vineyards are not extended, and I was. I was informed about the project in another island in the Canis. It's not important to say the name, but everything is so tiny. Even if you go to other islands like Chios, that has a rich history related around ancient Greek wine, it is very fragmented and tiny. But I see
Right.
there is an interest, and I'm hoping that in the next years, as we see the evolution of Tinos, we will witness the evolution of another island. It may be Paros. For me, Paros ticks all the boxes. Fantastic destination, proximity. It has also an airport.
Which is huge. I mean, some of these things seem basic, but as from a visitor standpoint, you need to have all those, like you said, all those boxes to tick.
It takes time to change the mentality of people and convince the growers maybe to become winemakers, because usually there is like something like in a cooperative that takes and that takes most of the grapes, and cooperatives are good but up to a point. um, so this is the revolution that we're expecting, and this happens slowly in the islands.
Right. Well, I think talking about the islands and you were just saying change comes slowly.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think is really interesting about a culture of winemaking that
Hmm.
is so old, such as Greece, is that balance between tradition and innovation. So traditional approaches and varieties, and then new winemakers. You have these younger winemakers or just new winemakers coming in with new technology, a different mindset. Do you think that the Greek wine industry has found a balance, or is it still trying to, is it still trying to find the balance between the tradition and the future?
Mm. That's a loaded question, Susan. I have to be honest. Balance, as I say it in Greece, but everywhere as well, is a journey. It's not a destination. But we're getting there. We are reinventing ourselves. And we are understanding that, first of all, we need to break down the variety, understand the variety. We understand now that maybe we need to reconsider the training system. So people are rethinking bush vines versus wide trained vines. Less is more is becoming more of a habit rather than an exception. But it takes time. But I'm really happy with how Greek wine and Greek winemakers have evolved over the last 5 years. I'm continuously um, arguing about giving the terroir expression of our wines in a world that is surrounded by a lot of, in brackets, commercial wines. We need to stand out, and we cannot compete with low prices. We need to compete with fantastic quality, and for that we need to express the terroir and present to the consumer something distinctive, something genuine, something really, really genuine, not abusing the word, saying, okay, this is distinctive. No, how distinctive it is. Well, if you taste the Santorini Assyrtiko, believe me, you will understand what is distinctiveness. You feel all this salty aftertaste, which is very rare. And maybe this salty aftertaste, I was discussing that with a good friend from Italy, um, and he was saying, I think that I can find this saltiness in all wines, white and red.
Hmm. So it's a character across the board for sure. It's always interesting to really become knowledgeable about different winemaking, you know, uh, either countries or regions, and start to see that that consistency. But from wine to wine, there's a thread that draws them together. And I think acidity and that salinity for me with the
Yes,
Greek wines
yes, exactly.
is something, which is also why they're, whether you're talking about island wines or wines from the mainland, it's why they're such great food wines, in my opinion, and so ageable. And I think as much as most of the wines that come onto the market, they're ready to drink now, but I think holding on to Greek wines, letting them age a little
Even
bit, the
better.
whites and the reds, is so important, and there's so much to be that's still to be discovered about these wines as they go through a little bit of that maturity. So, what do you think is the key to Greek wine taking off in America? Because obviously we're based in the US, and from my perspective, I really feel once people just try the wines, they're hooked for life. I think people get hung up on worrying about the pronunciation or worrying about, well, I've never heard of that variety before. But the flavors to me and the styles are just so delicious. Usually I just say, just don't ask, try it and taste it first, and then we'll talk about it after. What do you think is the key for American consumers to understanding Greek wine? And do you think they're ready to understand Greek wine, or does it matter if they understand Greek wine?
Again, Greek wine is an adventure. It cannot be a generic wine. It can be a terroir-driven wine. So um, we need to focus on the educated segment of the market, and you described it very well. We need to persuade people just to try it. This is more or less hand selling, and we need people like you. We need people like Tara, like Eric, talking about Greek wine because you understand it, you can communicate it, and the strong voice of Greek wine. This will do the difference. We need serious storytelling, not only educating, but storytelling. There is a difference, creating an emotional connection with what Greek wine can produce. This is storytelling. For me, what we described so far, also Assertico, also lovely wines from Xinomavro and Agorgitico, and other upcoming white varieties like Malagousia and Robola and Viviano. Of course, I cannot mention every variety, but this is the idea for me, and this is an alternative. What can Greek wine become? An alternative to Austrian wine. An alternative, no, let me put that again correctly. So, an alternative to French, Spanish, and Italian wine. So, if someone is bored, what will he or she taste? Greek wine. So that's why I think our main competitors, in a good way, are Austria, Portugal, and you understand what I want to say.
Mhm.
This is difficult because we need to persuade the markets to create a unique category and go to a restaurant in New York and have Greece. Not three labels, one Santorini, one of Crete, but establish our own category and not get away from the others category. This is the big bet for Greek wine. And it takes a lot of work. We need to strengthen the message. We need to see our marketing. We need to see our labels. We need to see our names. It takes a lot of work.
One of the things that I think really helps people understand Greek wine is absolutely, wine and food pairing. And obviously these wines are absolutely delicious with Greek food, but they're delicious with other cuisines. I mean, I think a lot about especially some of the white varieties you mentioned, and pairing those wines with, say, sushi, or
Very easily.
Thai cuisine, Indian food. I mean, to me, what's really exciting is to see the Greek wines breaking out of just the Greek food category, and really being paired. Chefs understanding, sommeliers understanding what the versatility of those wines, and really being creative in the pairings that they do. And I think that will also be that's an important part of exposing the wines to the American public, is really breaking them just out of the Greek category and showing that these are just excellent food wines across the board. And you mentioned some other great food wines of the world, Austrian wines, of course. The Portuguese make great food wines as well. But to me, this is where they really shine. I think most wine, it's true of most wine, but absolutely true of Greek wine. It has to be paired with food, and there are many ways to do that.
I agree
And
100%.
I love seeing that. To me, that's a huge one. So I would love some recommendations. I mean, obviously, we hope that everybody reads Wine Enthusiast and listens to the podcast and learns all about Greek wines here. But I'd love to know from your perspective how you think wine drinkers can learn more about Greek wine. Are there any resources or book recommendations that you have if someone wants to learn more?
Absolutely. We can talk, of course. People can navigate through my blog, karakasis.mw. There is so much information about the varieties. I have established now the Greek varieties part, so a lot of these varieties are covered in full extent. So we're talking maybe 5 or 6 thousand words. It takes a lot of time to publish that, and also there are some terroir reports. So I'm planning also to launch the next 15 days my Santorini ebook, which is around 25,000 words, covering a little bit of everything. So in my blog, you have a little bit, you have a lot of information about Greek wine, but you can find also a lot of stuff in the Wines of Greece. You can find a lot of stuff, as far as I know, in in three major books about Greek wine. In the Wines of Greece by Miles Lambert Cox, that was published in 1990, and I'm really amazed about the depth of information in this book, which was like a recent discovery of mine. The book of Nicomanesis, the book of Konstantinos Lazarakis, some books translated in English by Mrs. Kourakou, especially the book of Santorini. But this one again covers a lot of history, and also in other very good supporters of Greek wine, like Mark Andrew from Nobrod, who writes in Nobrod. He has written articles about Rapsani, about Ascetico. I know he's planning to write about Crete. So now we have a lot of supporters, a lot of friends, people that really, really love Greek wine. But first of all, what they really love is the Greek culture, because wine is part of that culture.
And so much, it's so seamless to me. I mean, because it's been part of the culture for so long that you can't really have one without the other, in my opinion. And that's the thing too. For people that are listening, there are so many places you can visit in the world that have a from a vino tourism standpoint. But to me, if you are interested in wine, if you're interested in history, you have to go to Greece. Not only because it's a beautiful place, but just because you really encounter that intertwined feeling of wine just is part of everyday life. And it to me, it's you can't be there without absorbing that and learning. And I know that history for many wine lovers is such an important thing, and the storytelling that you mentioned, that there's such incredible stories behind these vineyards, behind these the wineries, the people who are on these islands on the mainland making wine. It's really fascinating. So I'm just about to let you go, but it is well, it's Friday night
It is.
in Greece. I think you're into the night now. So have you eaten dinner? What is your Friday night, typical Friday night dinner? Do you have wine that you like to drink with it?
Um, I like. I always like to explore. I want to keep also my palate educated. So most of the time when we go out with my wife or my friends, I take some bottles of Greek wine and 1 or 2 bottles of wines from other countries. What I really love is fish. So today I'm gonna have some sushi, but my favorite fish is like a black grouper grilled. And I play around with some Greek wines, but I also like wines in the examples of South Africa Senin. I love the wines from Chris and Susan Alhate. I love the wines from Sancerre, from Vacheron. I love the wines of Cathy Corison. I can drink them with a black grouper. I don't have a problem.
Mm.
Um, so I try to keep things simple, just a quality fish and some nice wine, good company, relax a little bit. This is my idea of a Friday night.
That sounds incredible. I think that I'm going to probably have fish tonight too, and most likely we'll have some Greek wine with it. So,
Go for it.
Giannis, thank you so much for helping us understand a little bit more about Greek island wine and for all the work you do to promote all of these great categories. I hope we can talk again. Maybe the next time we'll talk about the mainland and
I would love
some
to.
of these high altitude vineyards that are so exciting in Greece. So,
Absolutely. That's a fantastic idea, Susan. And I need to thank you for all these things you're putting about Greek wine and for supporting us and for being such such an ambassador for Greek wine because we really count on you.
well, thank you so much. So have a great night and thanks again.
Talk soon. Bye bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Wine Enthusiast podcast. It may not be easy to hop on a plane and check out these magnificent Greek islands firsthand right now, but thankfully there's a world of uniquely characteristic wines just waiting to be enjoyed in your glass and that are ready to transport you with each and every sip. There were a lot of wines discussed in today's episode, including selections like Assyrtiko from Santorini, red blends from Crete, and Ribolla or Mavrodaphne from Kefalonia. Be sure to visit winemag.com/podcast for ratings and reviews of these selections and others discussed today, as well as additional links to learn more about Greek wines from the islands and beyond. Subscribe to the Wine Enthusiast podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you find podcasts. If you like today's episode, we'd love to read your review and hear what you think. And hey, why not tell your wine-loving friends to check us out too? You can also drop us a line at podcast@winemag.com. For more wine reviews, recipes, guides, deep dives, and stories, visit Wine Enthusiast online at winemag.com and connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Wine Enthusiast. The Wine Enthusiast podcast is produced by Lauren Buzzio and Jenny Groza. Until next episode, cheers.